Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Centerville. I'm Maureen Russell Hodson, and today my guest is a member of the greatest generation. He is a World War II war hero, and he has some fascinating stories to share. I am delighted to introduce you all to our guest, Don Barrett. And Don, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. You're welcome, Maureen.
And we got acquainted because our Centerville City Council is going to recognize you for your efforts during World War II. And as we were learning more about it, we thought you have such a great story to share. And I know you have spoken to various groups really all over the country.
Yes.
Sharing your story, but I thought we needed to hear it right here in Centerville, Ohio.
Makes sense to me.
Makes good sense. So let's start at the beginning when you're just a young man, 18 years old, and we actually have a photo of you, good looking guy, and still are today. But after the attack on Pearl Harbor, you decided this was something you wanted to enlist, right?
I enlisted 30 days after Pearl Harbor in the regular Marine Corps and served 4.5 years, a little over 2 years in the South Pacific.
And we're going to talk about some of your experiences, but you are not a native of the Centerville area. You're originally from Maryland, right?
Originally New Jersey. New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Ohio, West Virginia, Ohio, Texas, and then back to Ohio for good.
Okay, and that's over, obviously, your lifetime. You've really traveled around a lot.
Yes.
So give us an idea of when you first enlisted. You're 18 years old and probably had no idea what to expect.
Well, I had a friend that was in the Marine Corps who was a little older than me, and he told me some of the stories, and it just made me want to join the Corps.
Oh, is that right?
And so after Pearl Harbor, I told my parents I was going to enlist. Well, believe it or not, back in those days, you had to have parental permission. My mother asked me to stay home for Christmas. So I did, and the earliest date I could leave was January 7th. So I left January 7th, went to Paris Island. 58 days later, I went from warm Carolina to frozen Massachusetts, and I've never been so cold in my life.
You can still feel that cold weather.
Oh. I was there stationed there guarding an naval ammunition depot until the Marines landed on Guadalcanal.
And then everything changed for you, right?
Then I applied for combat duty, and 60 days later I was on Guadalcanal.
And you had some rough conditions there.
Well, 83% of the 1st Marine Division suffered from malaria, and I was no exception. In addition to that, I had acute infective yellow jaundice. The doctor said it's from rats nibbling on your toes at night. Well, I soon learned to wear my shoes.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I was evacuated from Guadalcanal on New Year's Eve, went to New Hebrides, and then aboard the hospital ship Solace to Auckland, New Zealand. There's a funny incident that happened on the Solace that's worth telling you about. When I would have an attack of malaria, I would run a sky-high temperature. It was nothing to get up to 106, 107.
Oh my goodness.
And I had an attack on the Solace, and as I was coming out of it, I could smell perfume and hear soft music, and there was something white in front of me, and I thought, well, you died and you went to heaven, and there's an angel, and I'm going to give her a big hug. And I reached up, and I got cracked across the side of the head, and this nurse said, I'm a registered nurse and a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, and no damn Marine's going to paw me.
It's probably the last time you ever did something like that.
Fast forward 12 years, when I was transferred from Frigidaire Sales Corporation in Baltimore to Frigidaire Division GM in Dayton. New employee, new company, new physical exam, and guess who was the RN who gave it?
Is that right?
12 years later.
That's amazing. And you've got great recall of your stories. And
well, I try and keep my mind active all the time. Unfortunately, my bride of 69 summers has dementia, so I'm acutely aware of what can happen, so I try and keep alert all the time.
And she was also
Yes.
in the military.
Eleanor was also in the Marine Corps. She enlisted in Wilmington, Delaware, and served 2 years in the Corps. She was in a research laboratory out in San Diego, California, checking all types of naval devices and procedures. To this day, we are arguing about whether or not she outranked me. She claims that she was a sergeant, and recently it's been up to a staff sergeant.
Okay.
But somehow they forgot to put that on her honorable discharge. So she's a silly corporal, and my biggest enlisted rank was that of a corporal. But believe it or not, Maureen, at one time I was company commander of an entire, well, what was left of a company of Marines.
I know, and that's a fascinating story. Why don't you share that with us?
Well, that was just one of the many things that happened in the 2.5 years that I spent.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, you want to pick up after you had talked about Guadalcanal. After that, you went where?
I rejoined my outfit in Melbourne, Australia, and we were staying there. And I got back the day we started the heavy training schedule. We would march 20, 25 miles out into the boondocks, play cops and robbers out there for 8 days, march back, and then we had a half a day to clean our clothes, do our laundry, stand inspection, and answer pay call. And then we were given 15 pounds Australia, that was equal to $50, and 60 hours liberty. And you don't want to know.
I was going to say, maybe we better not.
You don't want to know what 3,000 Marines did in 60 hours with $50 in their pockets. And after that, we went on to New Guinea, and we landed in Ora Bay. It was a deep harbor there. I was on a working party on a floating dock, and they would take the cargo out of the ship's hold and put it on the dock, and then we would load it into Higgins boats. Well, while we were there, the Japs Zeros came in and strafed us. And you had two alternatives. You could either jump in the water and hang on the dock and hope they didn't get you, or you could swim ashore. Well, 3 Marines tried to swim ashore in those shark-infested waters.
Oh, my.
One of them made it. I jumped over the side and hung on the side of the dock, and the Jap Zeros strafed us, but nobody got hit. And then the ships came back, and we finished unloading it and spent the next several months there in New Guinea, along with the snakes and the scorpions and typhus and malaria and the natives that would eat rats.
How did you make yourself keep going every day? Is it just something that you had to do? I mean, I guess you didn't consider the alternative.
It was part of the Marine Corps esprit de corps. You just do it. We had one case at Tomei, and I saw 500 men prostrate on the ground, running from both ends, just deadly sick. I saw 1,000 men with ear infections, and back in those days, they used to put gentian violet in the ears. And you see all these Marines running around with purple ears. People today don't know what gentian violet is. But that was New Guinea, and it was to prepare us for our Christmas Day landing on Cape Gloucester. They referred to Cape Gloucester as the Green Hell. It rained there for 140 days the first time we were there.
Oh my goodness.
We spent 4 months there, and while we were on Cape Gloucester, we set up a defense line that included Target Hill. I was then an assistant squad leader, and my position was on the extreme left flank of Target Hill. To my left was a 400-foot drop, and in front of me was a slope down the hill, and then to my right was a slope to the peak, and then this slope down the other side. Well, management wanted to know what the strength of the Japanese forces were. So they sent a patrol out, and Sergeant Deckrow picked 4 of us, and we went out into Japanese lines and ran into one of their camps, and we were rifling all of their maps and instruments and everything when the Japs came back. We had to fight our way back. We got back on Target Hill, and there happened to be a UP photographer there, and he wanted to get a picture of it. So he took that picture, and it appeared in the Baltimore papers.
And we're showing it right now.
And my parents' phone rang off the hook, for now they knew where their son was, who had been gone a year.
And you had no contact with
No
them?
contact.
You were obviously on the very far right as we're looking at the screen. So
Yes,
what
well,
was the outcome of that? You all just went in and ransacked everything you could? And then...
Everything we could. Then we had to fight our way back. When Bob Tabobin, Centerville's own Bob Tabobin,
Right.
wrote for Comrade and Country, he used that, or the publisher wanted some photographs, and Bob submitted that, and they used that on the front cover.
Now, how old are you there's the book which you can get at the
19.
Centerville Library, right?
Yes.
You're 19 years old, so look at how much you had seen of the world and how much battle and bloodshed at 19 years of age.
Yes, but that was nowhere near as bad as it was on Bloody Peleliu. Peleliu was my last campaign, and it was one of the, compared with Tarawa or Iwo Jima, it was the same thing. I took 17 men ashore on Peleliu. My squad had the flamethrower and 2 light machine guns, and we fought our way inland and set up a defense line that night, and the Japs counterattacked, and they dropped a mortar shell right in front of us, and I was kneeling firing back with my Tommy gun with Arthur Henry. He got hit 3 times in the forehead. I never got a scratch. I'll tell you, trying to bind up head wounds in the dark is not my bag. The next morning, I looked like I'd butchered a hog without killing it first. Anyhow, then we fought our way across Peleliu.
And as you're going through all of this, you see all this death and destruction, but you've just got to keep moving forward.
Well, I lost more than half of my squad in
Yeah.
that campaign. I had a little machine gun, a BAR man who got scared, and I said, don't empty a clip, fire burst. But he would put a clip in and fire it, and the Japs spotted him and dropped a mortar shell within inches of his face and blew half of his head off.
And so, I hate to sound trite, but when you hear people say war is hell, it really is. It's not like what you see in the movies.
Oh, no.
It's...
No. As we went across the island, we hit a major pillbox. And because my squad had the flamethrower, my lieutenant said, "Dee, burn them out." So I went to Chuck Victoria. Chuck was my flamethrower carrier. He was a big Montana sheep herder. The biggest, brownest eyes you ever saw in your life, the nicest guys. And he said, "Dee, do we have to go?" I said, "Yes, Chuck, it's showtime, let's go." So we went up to the pillbox, and he poured the flaming gasoline into it. And an officer and 3 enlisted men came running out of the back. And the officer had a saber raised up, ready to whack us when I walked across their chest with my Tommy gun and killed all 4 of them. Before I could get up, some other Marine came up and grabbed his saber, but I got his pistol and used it the rest of the campaign. Then as we moved across the island, one of my machine gunners got into trouble, and Whitey Morris, the gunner, got hurt, and they called for help, so I ordered covering fire, and then went in and bandaged up his arm and carried him out, and later I was decorated for that.
And you have quite a few medals that you're wearing right now. Do you want to talk about those?
Well, that's the Bronze Star with Combat V, the Purple Heart.
Now, there might be people who don't understand what the Bronze Star is.
Well,
So these are very big awards, and you need to, I mean, that's really something.
Well, the Bronze Star is not the biggest award. It's not as highly rated as the Silver Star, for example. And a lot of Bronze Stars were awarded for different types of service. In fact, My wife's cousin was a butcher in the Army, and he got one for boning meat. But when you see a Bronze Star
Yeah.
with a V on it,
Right.
then you know that somebody earned it in combat.
Which is what you did.
The one that I'm probably most proud of is the third one, the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal. You have to have 3 years of unblemished record to get a Good Conduct Medal. I understand today that a traffic violation will deprive you of it.
Really?
And there were some incidents in my career where
It didn't involve when you were on leave, did it?
yeah, no, nothing like that. And then the other, I think there's a few more medals that I could wear, but that's enough. As far as I'm concerned, the top three tell the story. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and the Good Conduct. And if you can't deduct from those where I was or what I did or how I did it, then you need to study your history.
And when you came back from the war, did you, well, I know you did training, but let's go forward several years. We had talked before we started the program that a lot of veterans, especially from World War II, don't really talk about their experience until later in life.
There was an awful lot of the members of the greatest generation who wanted to totally forget it. They didn't even discuss what happened to their spouses or their kids. But then there were a lot of us that felt this story should be told.
It needs to be told.
The people need to know what it was like, what we went through, the trials, the difficulties we encountered. And I was from that group that said, yes, the story needs to be told, and I'll be glad to help tell it.
And I know after, I don't know if you want to finish up a little bit about your service, because then following that, you ended up going training, right?
Well, after the pillbox incident, we were told to take what they called the Five Sisters. These were a series of small mountains that the Japs had. Remember, they'd been there for 40 years, and they had caves 3 and 4 stories deep. And they could jump out of an entrance and fire a mortar or machine gun and duck back in. You could never get them. So we were told to get them. Baker Company tried, Charlie Company tried, and they couldn't do it, so they sent us out. And it was in that assault that they dropped a mortar shell next to me and blew a hole in my left foot. And that took me out of commission. I was in the hospital when the word came out that we were being relieved. I went to the battalion surgeon and asked him for a release, and he said, I'll give you a release, but there's no way I can get you to the beach. I said, you give me a release, I'll find a way. So I hobbled, jumped about a half a mile to the beach.
Oh my goodness.
And the bandage came off and my foot began to bleed. And as I reached the beach, the last Higgins boat was pulling out, and 2 of my men saw me and called me and said, stop, and he jumped out and came and got me and dragged me on board. And that night I was in the sick bay, all washed and cleaned and freshly bandaged, and back to an island in the Russell Group called Pavuvu. It was a deserted coconut plantation. And when we got there, there were thousands of fallen coconuts, many of them that had rotted on the ground, and hundreds of land crabs. And of course, moving around there, the mud was terrible. So we moved tons of coral rock to build company streets and put underneath our tents and so forth. And we were there 4 months and then went into combat in Peleliu and then came back there after Peleliu. Had to get ready for the next campaign. But Marine Corps headquarters said otherwise, and they said any man with 2 years or more overseas can go home. So 2,000 of us climbed aboard the ship and sailed for San Diego.
Did it seem like it had been 2 years that you had served, or did it seem
No,
like a
because
lifetime?
I had moved around
Yeah.
so much. The time didn't, I always found things to do. So that didn't bother me.
So then you came back to the States.
We came back to San Diego, got new clothes, got our furlough orders, and we had to go through R&R. And this one sergeant said, he had my record book there, and he said, "Dee Dee, you've been through a lot. What kind of duty would you like?" And I said, "I'd like a nice, quiet guard company on the East Coast." He said, "I'm going to take care of you." The next day I got my orders, report to Paris Island, drill instructor school. So
Back where you had started.
back where I started on December 30th and restricted to the base over the New Year's Eve. While I was there, my orders came through to go to OCS. And I picked Villanova College, and the last 16 months that I was in the Corps, I was a Naval ROTC Marine Option student at Villanova. But the war ended. I was given my choice of an honorable discharge, or I could re-enlist, or the third option was to take my discharge and then enlist in the Navy, and I could stay there as a naval cadet in the ROTC program. And in another 8 months, I would have enough college credits for a commission as an ensign.
Sounds like maybe it wasn't a tough decision for you.
No, thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
I'll take my chances and go home. So I came back to Baltimore, and like most veterans, had a little problem adjusting a few different jobs. Finally had an offer with Frigidaire and signed with them and lasted for 30 years.
And you, in between time though, you had reacquainted yourself with your wife, who was
Yes.
your childhood
She,
sweetheart, right?
I'll tell you, Maureen, I was in a lot of combat, but the Battle of Villanova was a rough one. Just down the road from us was a little place, a little college called Bryn Mawr.
Mm-hmm.
And across the road was the Bryn Mawr Nursing Home. And then there was Immaculata, Temple, Penn. There's about 7 different colleges around there. And most of the males attending those were either returning veterans or 17-year-olds. So I tell you, the Battle of Villanova was...
But you married your wife in what year?
We were married in 47.
In
We'll be
47.
70 years this October.
Okay, and she is still with us as well. There's a gorgeous photo of her when she was enlisted.
Yes, she spent 2.5 years in San Diego there.
And then you two have had 6 children?
6 children, 3 and 3.
And then
We have one son that lives here in Beaver Creek. Our oldest son is in Arlington, Texas. Our oldest daughter in Houston. The next daughter in Austin. Our youngest son is in Las Vegas, and a daughter in Georgia, in Lake Hartwell, Georgia.
so you have a beautiful family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren even.
8
right?
grandchildren and 8 great-grands.
So when people call you part of the greatest generation, does that ring true for you? Do you think you are part of that greatest generation?
Oh, I don't
What
think
is the
there's any-
greatest generation?
I don't think there's any question
Yeah.
that, wasn't it Tom Brokaw that
Yes.
labeled it?
Yes.
And I think he was absolutely right. We were a generation that grew up with memories of World War I that we had heard from our parents or our grandparents. We went and served in all over the world, and then came home to pick up where we left off and went on. And I think my generation was far different from many of the veterans from Vietnam, who have too much, in my opinion, many of them have too much of a you owe me attitude. Whereas our attitude, our position was, what can I do to get reestablished, to marry, to buy a home, to raise a family.
And you just kept going on with your life. You didn't really look back, did you?
Well, I retired the first time after 30 years with GM, then the second time with White Consolidated after 6 years as National Sales Training Manager, And then I had my own consulting business for 3 years. And then I was 65 and all the kids were raised and educated, and I quit, and I haven't earned an honest dollar since.
Have you had an opportunity, I don't believe that, but have you had an opportunity to talk with some of these fellas that you had gone through some of these campaigns with, or that had become your friend?
Yes, we had an organization, our old company, and we used to meet annually and lie to one another as we told the stories of what happened and what really happened. But each year there's a few less members, and it finally got to be a point where the organizer passed away, and the rest of us are all in their late 80s, 90s, and either gone or unable to travel. But we met in, the last session was in Flint, Michigan.
Okay.
But we've met in various places around the country. But the ranks are so slim anymore, it's not worth it.
What lesson could you share with young people today from your experiences?
I would say one of the things that the kids ought to learn is to respect, to learn and respect. I had a situation here up at Ohio State 2 months ago when I was up in the dental college there, and the young lady that was taking care of me asked me where Guadalcanal was. And I thought to myself, here's a woman who's been 4 years of college and 3 years of med school, has no idea where Guadalcanal was. Now, sure, it was one of the battles in the Pacific, but it was the first one. That was where it all started. And I'm appalled sometimes at the people who have no idea of what World War II was about, or who even fought in it besides the U.S.
That's why it's such a treasure to have someone like you to share your story and to make sure that we keep those stories alive.
Well, I've tried to do it, and my daughter in Austin, Texas asked me to appear in her high school, and I talked to the group there. And then my granddaughter in Houston got wind of it and had the Chamber of Commerce contact me, and I spoke to the Chamber of Commerce. And I put on a 2-hour presentation for UD and the Lifelong Learning Program. As a matter of fact, just last week I talked to the veterans out at St. Leonard's.
So you're willing to share your story if someone watching would like you to come and speak to a group or a classroom?
Yes, I would be happy to.
So you
because I think the story needs to be told.
And you tell it so well, and what a hero you are.
Well, I don't know about being a hero.
Well, we know that you've protected our country and you've served our country, and we are a grateful nation. We thank you for your service.
You're most welcome.
And it's been a delight to talk with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get a hold of Mr. Barrett or have him come and speak to your group, you can call the city at 433-7151. You can also visit our website, centervilleohio.gov. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you again for your service to our country. We wish you all the best.
Thank you, Maureen.
We'll see you next time.